Welcome to an exciting season of BAME. So, here we're going to start your first lesson. Now, this should be basic review for everybody, but what we're going to do today is we're going to look at BAME in light of the idea of what economics is. So, this poster that I have hanging up in my room, that Mrs. Silva has hanging up in her room, highlight the six principles of the economic way of thinking. BAME is an economic simulation. Yes, there are political aspects of it, but politics is influenced by the economy and vice versa. So the primary goal of BAME is to emphasize free market activities. Adam Smith would have called this free market capitalism or capitalism in general. And what we're going to do here, real quick, is to go over the basic idea of how to approach BAME and to think about it. So, number one, first thing to realize is that economics, let me get back up here real quick. This thing here, economics is a way of looking at choices. Economics is really the science of choice making. Number one, people choose. So this is the foundation of all economic thinking, especially free market economic thinking, and in particular, the way that we approach BAME. You are the consumers in BAME. That means that you are the ones buying goods. You are the entrepreneurs in BAME. You are the ones selling goods. And as we'll talk about in future lessons, buying and selling involves some very specific criteria and rules. So the ultimate thing is people choose. You choose whether or not you want to be a seller. You choose whether or not you want to work for teachers, whether you want to try to be a banker, whether you want to buy your locker, whether you want to rent your locker, whether you want your friends to be your landlords, whether you want to buy products, what products you choose to buy. Do you want to buy the Jolly Rancher Pops from vendor number one or look around because there's probably 10 other people selling them? Do you desperately need an animal butt magnet? Yes, you do. But people choose. You in BAME are the consumer. The consumer are the people. They make all the choices. These choices have costs. If you choose to work for the government, if you choose to work for the Federal Reserve, if you choose to run for political office, if you choose to work for somebody, you're giving up time in order to do that. If it's a member of the Federal Reserve or as a um, representative or office holder of any kind, you're giving up your lunch period to do that on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Federal Reserve on Wednesdays. You're giving up your break periods, possibly in the case of Federal Reserve or in the case maybe of the president, in order to actually make stuff happen that needs to get done by a specific time or date. If you choose to be a banker, realize that your weekends are going to be like basically reserved and taken up by dealing with financial transactions. You, as a banker, agree that you're going to learn how to use the electronic banking system that we're putting in place this year. You also agree to take responsibility for when or for if something bad happens. If you're an auditor, you have to realize is that you choose to still be responsible for all of the work required on a Friday banking day and use your personal free time to go through and make sure all the banks are correct. If you choose not to do any of those jobs and you choose to work for a teacher, realize that you are accepting responsibility for a contract that you signed to fulfill your obligations. You choose to spend your money. You lose that money when you are buying stuff, but in return, you get the stuff. If you choose to save your money for the BAME auction, there's a cost for that too. You don't get whatever product that you were hoping to get at market day. You don't pay off necessarily your locker maybe as quickly as you would otherwise. You choose to sell insurance. You have to cover those insurance claims when they come in. You choose to buy insurance. You're sacrificing a part of your income on the gamble, on the risk that something bad will happen to you. You choose not to buy insurance, great, you get to keep that money, but you choose to accept the responsibility that you have to pay for the disaster that comes in. There are choices. People will respond to incentives in predictable ways. If you are an entrepreneur and a seller, people will be more willing to buy your product if you price it reasonably, if you make it very appealing visually, maybe if you give out free samples. If you want to work for the government, you're going to try to vote yourself a pay that makes it worthwhile for you to lose that lunch period every week. If you are going to be a banker, you realize that the pay you're going to get makes up for all the time that you have to take to do the banking. If you're an auditor, your pay and the potential for bonuses will be an incentive, be a push for you to do a good job. If you're going to work for the Federal Reserve, you get paid earlier than everybody else does, and your pay comes in no matter what because you're outside the purview of the government. These are incentives to get you to respond. If you want to be able to get a good grade in BAME, you're going to need to participate as a seller, as a worker, as a consumer, as somebody who is a responsible citizen. That means paying your bills, voting, being there when you have to be. People create economic systems that influence individual decisions. This has already been done for you. We're a free market. But you're going to make political choices that will make this market more truly a free market or more of a controlled, leaning towards command market. There are taxes that have to be paid because salaries have to be made. All of the decisions that the government makes are going to be based on the idea of how that influences themselves. If the taxes are too high, people are not going to spend at the market. If your salary is too high, that makes the taxes too high. If locker costs are too expensive, it's going to be hard to sell anything. If inflation really hits the value of the peso, that is going to be a problem for you as well. So all of these things will influence the decisions that are made. People game when they trade voluntarily. Nobody's going to force you to buy or sell anything. It's all your choice. Your grade is not based on how much profit you make or how successful you are as a businessman. There are awards that are based on that. Those are incentives, but that's not how we determine the grade. You choose when, where, how, and why you will buy and sell in the marketplace. Now, that trade is all voluntary, but that does not mean that it's not regulated to some degree. You cannot sell illegally. What does illegal sales mean? Well, the fabled BAME black market. The only time that you are allowed to sell products for pesos and exchange goods and services is at market day. That does not mean you can't take advanced orders. You are free to do that. That does not mean you cannot deliver your orders on a non market day. You are free to do that. What you cannot do is run a BAME store out of your locker. You can't have an entire stack of BAME products sitting in your locker and sell them outside of market day. That's not how that works. Taking orders is not black market, which leads to this one. People's choices create unintended consequences. If you choose to sell illegally, there will be a consequence. That will affect your grade. That will also probably involve cheating and may actually call in Mrs. Sullivan to have to deal with an academic problem of integrity issues. If you choose to price your product super high, you may result in not being able to sell very much. If you price your product really low, you may sell a ton of it, but you may find that you're not making a profit. If the government chooses to set the taxes too high, they may find that people just aren't able to pay them, or even worse, that the market suffers. If you as a banker refuse to negotiate on locker price, you may end up losing on those things. If you as a buyer choose not to buy your locker, great. You don't have to buy your locker, but you lose out on the benefits of owning property. There are unintended consequences, and sometimes laws get passed that people don't even think about. What happens when you try to pass a patent law? You may be stuck in Congress, in BAME Congress, for weeks debating how it's going to work and making it go legally. All of these things are factors in BAME. Know these 6 things because on Monday, Mrs. Silva and I are going to have a little quiz to go over and make sure that you understand these 6 things. So, your first introduction to BAME is the 6 aspects of an economic way of thinking and how that applies to BAME. If this didn't make any sense or you have any questions, please hit me up. Otherwise, peace and love.